variable has 5 different virtues of similar nature. 5 are masculine and 5 are feminine. The first is intuition, where people just know in their gut something that they should do. And the second is analysis, when they sit and look at maybe a column of numbers and figure out what they should do. Next, you have emotion and logic, when people pay attention to their emotions and then they logically think through whether that makes sense or not. When you have empathy, that's when you walk a mile in someone else's shoes. You feel how they're feeling. But we all know that those feelings need to be tested so that they don't dial up to the extreme and spiral out of control. That's where it's important to have the rational thought of masculine energy. Feminine energy is all about the right brain and all the creativity that happens over there, while masculine energy is all about the left brain and logically thinking things through. And feminine energy is all about feeling, while masculine energy is all about thinking. A perfect example of the right brain, left brain, heart versus head variable was shown to us by a woman named Jill Bolte Taylor. She was a Harvard neurologist who had a stroke. And when she was at home by herself having that stroke, she lost the left side of her brain, the rational thinking part that was always giving instructions and telling her what to do and making sure that she got things done. Very goal-oriented. And what came through was the whole right side of her brain that really appreciated beauty and creativity. And she saw color and light and felt a great sense of peace. While she was rehabilitating, she spent a lot of time thinking about the 2 sides of her brain and came to the conclusion that we spend too much time in the left part of our brain and that we're actually, therefore, in our vice. And it's stressful and it makes us argumentative. And she felt that we really need to be developing our right. So let's talk now about the vices. Heart variable, you're in danger of your emotions spiraling out of control and falling into your vices. For example, if you're too much in your feminine energy intuition, you don't think things through and you can end up falling into the vice of being impulsive. If you are too much in your emotions, you can fall into the vice of being overly dramatic. And no one wants to work with someone who's frustrated or sad or anxious, especially when it happens all the time. If you're overly empathetic, you can end up being a people pleaser. You're so concerned about the feelings of others that you forget about your own, and you end up over in their territory constantly trying to make them happy and please their emotions while you forget about your own. If you're too much in your right brain, you can become overly stimulated. And if you're too much in your feeling, you can be overly reactive. You know, we often see this vice portrayed in romantic comedies. You see a woman who's way too much in her emotions and worried about things and can't get things done because she's overly sensitive. And some man comes into her life and balances her and helps her think her way through things. And she ends up feeling secure. Or conversely, a romantic comedy might show you a man who is so much in his thinking that he has no feelings and he can't enjoy his life. And some woman comes into his life and shows him the benefits of feeling and emotion and opens his heart, and he becomes a more complete human being. Well, once again, we can do this for ourselves. It's important that we balance our thinking with our feeling so that we keep either of them from spiraling out of control. In the head-heart variable, if you're in masculine energy and you're too much in your head and you fall into your vice, you can be in danger of overthinking things. And that means that when you do analysis, you end up scrutinizing everything. You can't let anything go. And you become so logical that you become rigid. If there's not a logical explanation, you won't accept it. You become so rational that you end up being disdainful. Or you can become so much in your left brain that you compartmentalize everything. This happens to us when we end up with two opposing thoughts at once. We can't handle it, so we compartmentalize them, as opposed to allowing them to create a new and maybe better solution for us. And if you're too much in your thinking, you can become robotic. A woman who was too much in her masculine energy was Leona Helmsley. She owned a chain of hotels and was completely disdainful. She took pride in firing anyone who made the slightest mistake. Her employees dubbed her the Queen of Mean. Ultimately, she was jailed for tax evasion, and all those employees came out to cheer her going to jail. I was at a sales meeting, and I was just on my way into dinner when I felt someone tap me on the shoulder, and it was the company's CEO. And he took me aside and he said, "You know, Betty Ann, supply and demand is way out of balance right now, and we're losing money, and there's going to be a lot of layoffs. It's not going to be pretty around here for a while, but I want you to hang in. It's a good company, and you'll have a good career here." He said, "I've been in the business for 30 years, and I can tell you that the business turns around on a dime. All it takes is a mine to flood in Russia or China to come in with a big order, and things change fast. Hang in." Well, I didn't quite know what to do with that information, but I went on to the meeting, and the next week I was on my way down to the States, and I stopped in Minneapolis to make a plane connection. And as was my practice, I phoned back to the office to see if there was any news or anything I had to deal with. This was in the days before cell phones, so I had to find a payphone. So I got into one of those little cubicles, and I called my secretary, and she said, "Are you sitting down?" Well, those little cubicles used to have a little sort of a triangle seat, and I wedged myself down into that seat, and I said, "Yes, I'm sitting down." And she said, "Everyone above you has been fired." I was shocked. I carried on with my travels and went to visit my customers, but I'll tell you, my mind was elsewhere that week. I made it back to Saskatoon, and it wasn't a pretty sight. One shoe had dropped. Senior management was gone. Everybody knew the next shoe was going to drop, so they were trying to make other people look bad so they could look good, so they could keep their jobs. And eventually that did happen. People were gone. I looked around, and there was all kinds of things that needed to be done, but the people whose job it was to do them, they were gone. So I kind of decided, well, this needs to be done. We've made a commitment to customers, and I started doing it, and this needs to be done, and I started doing that. Well, it wasn't fun. Our budgets were frozen. We were being asked to do more with less. People were immobilized because they didn't want to make a mistake for risk of losing their jobs. And in the midst of all this, I got a phone call from another company offering me a different job. And I was very tempted to take it. But I had to think about the words that came back from my now departed mentor, our CEO. "It's a good company. Things can turn around quickly. You'll have a good career. Hang in." And I thought that through, and I had a feeling, my intuition told me that it was a better place to be. And I decided to take his advice and stay. And at first I was euphoric. I'd made a decision and I was going to move forward. I was going to make this the right decision. But then, of course, I was surrounded by all the pessimism of the office. And it was hard, and I had days where I really doubted it. But fortunately, my thinking stepped back in and reminded me of the reasons why I had chosen to stay, and the advice that I had received. And eventually it turned out exactly as he predicted. World demand caught up with supply, prices rebounded, we started making money again. And the new management looked around and said, Betty Ann, you're doing a lot more than your job description entails. We're going to give you a higher title. And the money followed soon thereafter. And that became the basis of one of my mottos, which is get the responsibilities first, and then go for the title, and then go for the money. And none of that would have been possible if I hadn't combined thinking with feeling. Add your score from questions 21 to 25 inclusively on the Go-To Energy evaluation. If your score was higher on the first part, that means that you operate from feminine energy or the heart center in this variable. If your score was higher on the second part, that means that you tend towards thinking or masculine energy in the head-heart variable. Each and every one of us want to self-actualize. We want to become everything that we can be as an individual. And that means operating from our head and our heart together. So if you tested feminine energy in the head-heart variable, we want to develop your thinking. You probably rely on your feelings to tell you how to think. So what we want you to do is to just use facts. Instead of saying, it's cold outside, you say, it's 37 degrees outside. Instead of saying, this restaurant was horrible, you say, I didn't like the lights, they were too soft, I couldn't see. I didn't like the food, I thought it was too mushy and had a poor consistency. And I didn't like the price. I paid $30 a person for something that should have been $15. So speak with facts. Try doing it for a week, and you'll develop your masculine energy. If you operate from masculine energy in the head-heart variable, you need to develop your feminine. You probably take an impersonal, objective approach to things, where feminine energy people know the value of supporting others and showing them that they care. If you're operating from masculine energy, you probably view others as problems to fix, as opposed to people to relate to. So it's a time for you to stop and actually feel your feelings. When someone says something to you, rather than thinking your way out of it, see where you feel it in your body. Does it make your arms tingle, your head feel heavy, your neck feel stiff? How does it feel? Because if you identify your feelings, you'll be able to feel others better, and you'll develop empathy. So take some time to identify your own feelings, and then ask others how they're feeling when something happens, and really listen to the answers so that you can feel it too.